Okay, you are live. Okay, you are live. Okay, you can start.
Okay, sir. Okay. A very good morning to all of you. Here it is a Friday and we are with the new topic for our webinar. Today our speaker is Dr. Snehal Patel. I would like to give her a brief introduction of her. That she has done her UG from BJ Patel College of Physiotherapy, Anand, and PG from University of Pittsburgh, USA, with stand first in the USA for physical therapy. She has nearly 6 years of experience in Indian and USA working in outpatient as well as a skilled nursing facility servicing for the better of patient with good results. She is now in academics since last 3 years. She is currently working as an assistant professor in Ukatarsadia University from South Gujarat, India. Apart from this, she has regularly attended workshops, seminars, and conferences to keep her updated with professional evidence-based knowledge. She has been invited as a resource person in different colleges. Her objective is to impact knowledge in vestibular field as per her expertise. She has attained abroad by giving back to the community. I welcome on behalf of PIPT family and Parul University, Dr. Snehal Patel to take over this webinar. Please welcome ma'am.
Thank you very much, Dr. Prachi, for such a nice introduction. And I would be happy to conduct this webinar and get to know a newer topic, which is not, maybe it is untouched or not gone into detail so far. So I would be happy to do it. I'll go into the brief as we go forward. So today's topic, as we say, would be more on of our vestibular system, a basic or an overview of it, and followed by the risk assessment of the falls, which is a normal or a very common thing. The other thing which I would like to add up is since September is the fall awareness week or fall awareness month, this would be the right time to start over for our geriatric patients. So let's start up with the presentation. Is the screen visible? Is the screen visible? Today our topic is Introduction to Vestibular System and Risk Assessment for Falls in Balance. So we'll start with vestibular system first, the anatomical part, since we are not very much aware about the vestibular system in whole. The objectives of today's webinar would be anatomy for vestibular system, physiology of the vestibular system, strategies for the balance, evaluation for balance, which is the main criteria which we will go into detail about each and every test and what are the risk factors, and high risk values for fall. So we can identify a patient who is just coming normally for a treatment, but how far they are prone to getting falls in the near future. The components. Continuing with the first topic about anatomy of vestibular system. Vestibular system can be divided into two parts, like any other sensory system. It is peripheral component and central component. The peripheral receptors, as we all know, vestibular system is the part of the membranous labyrinth of the inner ear. Other part of the labyrinth is cochlea, which is concerned with the inner ear. It is located in the temporal lobe. Membranous labyrinth is surrounded by the fluid called perilymph and filled with the fluid called endolymph. When I'll be showing you the picture, the same thing would be seen visually so you can comprehend more better. Endolymph has a density higher than water, which is important for vestibular system function because, as we all know, it has inertial characteristics. As our inner ear, which is consists of the vestibular system, has some of the endolymph which has density which is higher than the water. Labyrinth or otolith organs are divided into three main parts. The three pairs of semicircular canals. And when we say three pairs of semicircular canals, one pair is first is anterior, second is lateral, and the third is horizontal. Then comes your utricle, and the third part is the saccule. Semicircular canals. So the first point of otolith organs, that is semicircular canal, can be divided into the three parts, as I say. So it functions as an accelerometer. Accelerometer, when we talk about accelerometer, it is similar to the accelerator that we have in a linear acceleration of a car or a bike. They lie at the right angles to each other. All the semicircular canals, anterior, posterior, and horizontal, are at right angles or 90-degree angles to each other on either side of the head and are named as the following: anterior, posterior, and horizontal. One pair is affected by any given angular acceleration of the head or body. So one pair, when they are saying it is anterior, so both the side, right and left anterior, when works together, it works concomitantly as angular acceleration, or we can say when we are spinning around. The sensory ending of each canals are in the enlarged end of each canal, which is called ampulla. So all these three canals, anterior semicircular canal, posterior and horizontal of your right side, pile up and go into the ampulla. Now, given the visual presentation of the same thing, when I talk about the semicircular canals, we have to concentrate on your left side. So semicircular canals, they have identified which are at right angles, all the three. The uppermost part is your anterior, the lowermost part or the oblique part is your posterior, and the center part, which is right exactly horizontal, is your horizontal or lateral posterior, lateral semicircular canals. All these canals has a darker blue fluid, if you can see. Those are called the semicircular ducts of the membranous labyrinth. And those are all coming together at the utricle in total. So all the three canals, the anterior, posterior, and lateral, come into forming a ampullar or ampullar crest, and those ampulla combine to form a utricle. And there is something on the lower left corner that you can see, membranous ampulla. So those are the three ampullae of the three semicircular canals. And these three ampulla or ampullar crest conform and make into utricle. And this is something of the inner ear, where the left side of the inner ear that we have gone through, the semicircular canal, that is one part of our otolith organs. Continuing forward, we will be coming back to this figure again. Orientation of semicircular canals. So when we are talking orientation, first thing we already know that they are right angles to each other. So the right hand figure shows us that how the right anterior canal and left anterior canal are exactly parallel to each other, while the left posterior canal and left anterior canal are parallel to each other. So those are parallel things which in it helps us for angular acceleration. So when we are moving from right to left, and if we are rotating our head from right to left, the hair cells that is present in the semicircular canals or the ampulla gives us the acceleration motion about which side our body is moving, and thus we can comprehend with our somatosensory action that the body or the muscle power has to be used or being controlled eccentrically on the other side. The left side of the figure shows that how when we see it from laterally, our angle of our semicircular canal, left and right horizontal canals, would be 30 degree from the normal eye level. So horizontal canal is horizontal, but it is 30 degree above your normal eye level. Now, this is an activity just to know about how our vestibular system connects with our eyes or vision. So if I give you an activity of this, and if I tell the people students to find out how many W for waste, can you figure out in this? You can write in the chat box the answer if you have. How many number of W, or you can see in this jumbled up figure. It gives your comprehension about vision to your brain, that how your vestibular system or how your brain works when it comes to jumbled up words and simple words. So the answer to this activity, it's just 30-second thing, but the answer to this activity is there are total 6 W's in this, but you have to concentrate with different colors, different letters, and the different things that is there in your surrounding, keeping everything in your mind. So this is a comprehension of vision to brain, where some of the things that your eyes see cannot comprehend it faster. The same way, if we see a very clear W line for 6 of them, we would be able to comprehend in maybe a second or two, but this would take more than 30 seconds to comprehend. Continuing forward, as we all saw that the semicircular canals combined an individual anterior, posterior, and horizontal semicircular canals come in center to form ampulla. So each ampulla has an ampullary crest which contains the vestibular hair cells. As you can see in the lower figure, the ampulla is being showed and it is been enlarged to see that they have hair cells. The white part is the hair cells, and the inside that funnel-like structure. The hair cells project upward into the cupula. So hair cells, the inner of your ampulla is cupula, and those in this cupula, your hair cells are projecting itself, which is the cupula, which is made of gelatinous material and extending to the top of the ampulla, preventing movement of the endolymph past the cupula. So that is why whenever your acceleration or movement of your head is happening, the hair cells remain in the cupula, and the motion of the hair cells will decide which side or how fast you are going when you are moving forward as a walking or running or jumping. So those are the impulses that has been provided, the yellow part that you are seeing down, which is extending to the vestibular nerve, if you can see it. Those are the things that are passing the impulses to the brain, saying that how much linear acceleration is produced during the semicircular canals or in the specific semicircular canals, so that the body can accustom to it. This is the inner structure of cupula, which is the hair cells, the yellow part that goes forward. These are the hair cells, the pink, it is projecting in your blue part, which is the cupula. And the last or the uppermost part of the pink and dark pink structure is your ampulla, which is embedded inside with the cupula. Now, as we see the photo of the lady or doing ice skating, the left part shows the stationary object. So that stationary portion is being shown by stationary hair cells, stationary cupula, and your ampulla. The right side shows the rotating or the movement of the ice skater, and those rotatory motions are being shown by rotation of the hair cells towards your left, and thus the cupula is moving towards the left as the arrow shows. So that by the yellow cells or the vestibular nerve cells goes to the brain, saying that there is a movement or an angular motion of the body, and thus the muscles and the body have to accommodate it according to it. So it is the vestibular system that accommodates our movement of the body, as well as the ability of a person to balance themselves. So your vestibular system, basically your vision, somatosensory, and vestibular. Those are the three things that helps you in the balance. So we have started with the vestibular system. Now the second part, the first part was semicircular canals. The second part was utricle, which is part of the inner ear. So utricle and saccule, which is division of your peripheral otolith organs, gives information about linear acceleration of the head of the body. So this is linear, while semicircular canals gave you the angular acceleration. Hair cells are present in the epithelium, even in utricle and saccule. Thus, the area is called macula. In this, the area is called macula, where hair cells project in utricle and saccule. So again, a figure showing how the linear acceleration happens. So going from below to above. The lowest part is the vestibular nerve axons, the small yellow thin lines that you can see on the left side. Above it are the cells, epithelial cells or the supporting cells. The purple uh, part is the hair cells, which are projecting into the macula, as we saw it in the previous thing, the macula, which is a gelatinous material or gelatinous cap, which helps or it increases the density of the hairs of the material. Thus, the hair cells only will move if there is a considerable amount of movement. The highest or the topmost part is your otoliths or otolith organs. Now, this otoliths are calcium carbonate crystals. So it is like chalk pieces. So small calcium carbonate crystals, which are just on the top of it. So whenever it moves from forward to backward, so if we are nodding yes, and we are moving from right forward to backward, the gelatinous cap or your hair cells will move forward, and thus it will move backward. So on the right side, it is showing the movement of the lady going back. When it goes back, the gelatinous materials is moving back. Now, if you see very sharply, the hair cells has the first cell is the proper thing, and there is a bulbous part in it that is called kinocilium. That kinocilium is the main, is I think the head of the hair cells, who would provide the assessment whether the patient the person is going back or the movement of linear acceleration is going back or forward. So all the hair cells are going to follow the first hair cell, which is called kinocilium, which gives you a sensibility into the gelatinous material whether it is going forward or backward. So in the otolith organs, utricle are for angular acceleration, and the inside of the utricle, the otolith organ, this is the structure that is shown, basically the component of hair cells and your gelatinous material, and the last is your otoconias. Otoconias, why it is important, just a brief overview. Otoconias sometimes got dislodged from the gelatinous material, and thus other problems like BPPV and all those things can happen. Continuing forward with utricle, this hair cells project to the gelatinous material, the otolith organ. The otolith organ has many calcium carbonate crystals, which are known as otoconia or otoliths. The macula of the utricle lies in the horizontal plane when the head is held horizontally, so the otolith rests upon it. But if the head is tilted or accelerates, the hair cells are bent by the movement of the gelatinous mass. This is the explanation, same thing that is visually explained in the figure before. The macula of the saccule lies in the vertical plane when the head is positioned normally. So it responds selectively to the vertically directed linear forces, as in the semicircular canals, hair cells in the otolith respond to a bending in a directional manner. So this specifically your otolith organs of utricle gives you a linear acceleration of forward and backward. Now we will go through the vestibular system as in physiology of the vestibular system. In the anatomy of vestibular system, we saw that there are three parts of your otolith organ. So before going to this, let's go back to our figure, the main figure. Okay, so we have three parts in the otolith organs: peripheral, which is divided into three semicircular canals, utricle, and saccule. Semicircular canals, the function is as an accelerometer or directional movement, while utricle and saccule has linear acceleration, and those all are done with the labyrinth or membranous labyrinth. The right side is your vestibular nerve or cochlear nerve, cochlea, which is the inner ear, and the apex of the cochlea, from where the sound or the cochlear duct is present. So these are the two parts of your vestibular system. Going how it comes physiologically, how the messages are passed. If we go to the physiology of vestibular system, we'll go from top left corner. So the person is doing a swing. So those vestibular system are being activated, and the receptors in the inner ear are activated. That receptors are going to the brainstem. When it goes to the brain at the brainstem level, it divides into four specific parts through the different tracks. So if it is going to the vestibular, so thalamus and cortex, it interprets input, plays a role in the motion perception and spatial orientation of a person, where a person is around with respect to the environment. The second is oculomotor nuclei. It steadies the eyes as the head and body moves. Now, I think all of us must have seen the doll when we were little. So whenever you see a doll eye movement or a doll eye maneuver, whenever we move on the right, the eyes move on the left. So that is how it moves around. The third is the spinal cord. So when the brainstem gives signal to the spinal cord by the spinal vestibular spinal tract, it influences muscle tone and postural adjustment. So basically your somatosensory system. And the last one is cerebellum, which is coordination of eye control, head movement, and posture, which is important for balance. So vestibular system also helps in balance, helps in your muscle tone and postural adjustment. For given the oculomotor nuclei, it helps the movement of your head and body, and the thalamus and cortex, which helps to interpret the input of the motion of perception and spatial orientation. So given a very simple view of how movement of your body in angular or linear acceleration will help you go to the vestibular system, then only you'll be able to get the identification of where you are in the space. And that is the main thing of vestibular system. A part of vestibular system is also important for your balance, because after the vision and somatosensory, vestibular system, if not working, you would have issue with that. Before going to the balance, I hope. Okay. So this is the part of the anatomy and physiology of the vestibular system. Continuing forward for balance, I'll just go with the overview of dizziness and vertigo. Now, when we talk about dizziness, it is the basic or a big umbrella or a gross thing that we talk, because whenever a patient comes to us, they say that we have dizziness. Now, which types of dizziness we have? And vertigo is just a type of dizziness and not dizziness in total. So when we say about vertigo, it is an illusion of movement, usually rotation. Now, every one of us have asked some or the other time that whether vertigo is movement of us as a person with the respect to the environment, or is it the environment that is moving and you are stable? So there are multiple things going on, but vertical is basically there is no movement, but you are feeling that there is a movement or rotation around you. The second part of the dizziness is presyncope, a feeling of faintness or loss of consciousness. Now, presyncope, the word is mostly used when there is hypoglycemic patient who is coming for a therapy and he falls down. There is a blood pressure patient who suddenly drops, has drop in the BP, and he or she faints. So in that case, presyncope is mostly the type. The third type is disequilibrium, a sense of unsteadiness in the lower body. So your legs are shivering or you are unable to balance yourself. That is disequilibrium. But in every part of this, the patient is going to say you dizziness. No effect on the feeling in the head is seen. So there is nothing wrong in the head, or person doesn't feel anything dizzy or moving around the head or rotating around the head. Relieved when sitting down. So disequilibrium is basically not unconsciousness, but the patient feels uneasy in the lower body and is relieved while sitting down. The other type, some of the other things that we patient is saying as dizziness or explaining as dizziness: swimming or floating sensation. Now this we usually hear from people who have gone on the sea, like on the ship or in a boat or on a yacht. On a yacht, usually you see that because there is that moving sensation of the waters or in the ocean or a river, and that gives you that floating sensation. And sometimes even in the cars and buses, people have that car sickness. So that would come into your other subtypes of dizziness, because we usually say ourselves or others speaking about dizziness in that case too. Feeling of dissociation or difficult to describe, because sometimes even I have heard people saying that it feels funny. Funny means they are unable to explain how they are feeling, or how, whether they are dizzy or they are uncomfortable or whatever it is. Dizziness sometimes or many times is associated with vomiting, and that is very common because the thalamus is activated. So in that excitation phase, even vomiting comes from that part. So that is why dizziness and vomiting can go together. Even vertigo and vomiting can go together when it comes to signs and symptoms. So mostly all your vestibular system would have vertigo, a part of a symptom. And the other thing is your vomiting and uneasy sensation. Those are the things that are the signs and symptoms most commonly seen in vestibular patients like BPVV, unilateral vestibular loss, bilateral vestibular loss, and all such things. Going forward, balance. Balance, we all know a couple of slides, like 3 slides probably. I have just given an overview so that you can read through it so we can know about the details. So balance is a dynamic process by which the body's position is maintained in equilibrium. Going forward, we all know center of mass, center of gravity, and base of support. Our base of support when a person is standing is basically between our legs in the center. Center of gravity is S2, the line that passes through your body parallel, which goes perpendicular to the ground. That is the center of gravity, or COG, and it is in forward of the center of mass. Is for a normal adult, it is S2 at the S2 level, which is anterior and forward to your S2 level, which changes depending on your body types, depending on your problem, a posture, and all those things. Causes. There are 2 main causes of having balance issues. So first is your sensory system, which is mainly visual, somatosensory, and vestibular. And the second is motor system, which is strength and endurance, range of motion, and flexibility. That is the part of your cause or the problem where your balance is an issue or is in dilemma. Strategies. Normally in a normal individual or even in a geriatric individual, when we are having perturbation, different kinds of perturbation, while having change in the balance, we are in a crowd and someone pushes us, or we are running and something hits us, then which type of strategies do we use? So just going with the first is the ankle strategy, which is most commonly used. And from all this strategy of hip strategy and stepping strategy, ankle strategy is the most used, and 80% of our balance is explained or been controlled by ankle. And that is the reason or the cause why geriatric patient or old patients have less balance, because their ankle mobility has reduced due to less activity or less mobility. So on the right, the forward sway and the backward sway, the muscles that are being activated during those strategies are being portrayed. Ankle strategy is movement of the ankle only. Hip strategy is more of when a little medium perturbation is provided and your movement is from hip. If you can see in the smaller circular picture, you can see the hip strategy, ankle strategy, and how the stepping strategy works. Now, if a higher level of perturbation, like you're jumping off 2 steps, or you are moving and there is suddenly something, for having reduction in the level of imbalance, you have to take a step forward so that you can balance and increase your base of support. In ankle strategy and hip strategy, your base of support is very small, and that is why the movement of the upper body happens. So these are the main 3 strategies which we already know or have learned some other place in previous session. Evaluation. The most important part, evaluation or assessment of your balance. So which are the tests and how we can assess it? So we have divided the evaluation in static balance test and dynamic balance test. Static balance is majority when the patient has problem standing up, just standing up. So some of the static balance test is Romberg test, sharpened Romberg test, single leg balance test, and stock standing test. So these are some of the main tests if the patient is really debilitated and is unable to stand up. Dynamic balance test, we have multiple battery of tests in this, but the main important, which is reliable and valid both, is TINETI or POMA, Berg balance score. Now in these 2, I have written both the 2 tests in dynamic balance test together. Is TINETI was previously, I think 10 years back or 5 years back, TINETI was more prevalent and it is more valid. But in today's scenario, Berg's balance score is more important, as it has got more validity, and that is why it is called a gold standard for your balance. Time up and go test, gait speed, and 6-minute walk test, and the last thing is functional reach test. Now these all tests we will go into detail about how it is performed, but the more important thing is which are the values that is you have to see, or there is a red flag for the high risk fall when you are assessing for your patient, any patient. Romberg test, as shown in the figure on your left, it is done two ways, eyes open and eyes closed. The estimation of the time limit that the eyes has to be closed and open should be 30 seconds, and the feet should be together. So we should start with performing with each other, or doing it with the patient is standing in front of you with feet together. You have to tell the patient to keep the eyes open and stand for 30 seconds. The second step is keep the eyes closed and stand for 30 seconds. What a therapist or a patient, person should be looking for is any sway that is seen in the patient. And the high fall risk, as shown in the red, high fall risk is within less than 30 seconds. If the patient is falling or maybe moving or opening the eyes, that is kind of a positive sign for loss of balance. Normal sway is acceptable, but when the patient moves around for the whole 30 seconds, it is difficult. So that is your Romberg test. Sharpened Romberg, when we go with sharpened Romberg, it is the feet are in front of each other, like tandem walk. So tandem walk, same thing, estimated time is 30 seconds, eyes open first and eyes closed. And again, same thing you have to see for loss of balance. And the criteria or the analysis of the Romberg test, if it comes positive, is sensory ataxia. The patient has sensory ataxia, so movement disorder. Going on with the dynamic balance test, POMA or performance oriented mobility assessment. It checks the transfers with eyes open, eyes closed, standing balance, perturbations, 360-degree turns. So all these criteria of balance are checked in your POMA or TINETI. Gait is also checked. In that, safe speed, initiation of gait, length, height, and trunk motion is calculated during performing the motion. Maximum score of this POMA is 12 and total score is 28. And as we say, score of 10 to 24, if you get the patient score to 10 to 24, the patient is at moderate risk of fall, while a score of less than 19 is high fall risk. So anything less than 19, so it should score of 19 to 24, and score of less than 19 is a high fall risk, and that is TINETI. And that is the first part, or very old, prominently used before. Then comes Berg balance score. Berg balance score, as it is shown, the item description is, rating is from 0 to 4. There are 14 items in total, and 14 items, so one item sitting to standing, if you are considering it, is 0 to 4. And the total score or the maximum score in Berg balance score is 56. It is called as a gold standard presently in forming of dynamic balance, or if you want to assess patients' dynamic balance. The high fall risk criteria is less than 30. If the patient has high fall, less than 30 score, then you have to term the patient as high fall risk, and the patient, the ability of the patient to have the balance properly, or you have to start with the treatment related to improving the balance or give an assistive device. Anything less than 45, the patient is compulsorily provided with an assistive device. The Berg balance score, why it is the best? Because it has good intra and inter-rater reliability. Again, it has total 14 items in the test: sitting unsupported, sit to stand, and stand to sit. Transfers, in that mainly they are focusing on standing, eyes open with eyes closed, feet together, head turns, 360-degree turning, and tandem, standing and tandem walking. So all those things are in Berg balance score included in it. And high fall risk, as I said, it is less than 30, and when it comes to less than 45, the patient is provided with an assistive device. The next test we are discussing is timed up and go. So tug test or time up and go is a test where the first step, you have to follow the steps. So where patient is sitting in a comfortable manner, he or she has to stand up, walk for 3 meters, then turn around and walk, come back and sit down. So that is your fifth step. So third step is turning around, walking back is the fourth step, and fifth step is sitting around. So time taken for the patient from sitting to walking to turning and coming back and turning and sitting down is calculated by the therapist. What does tug test or time up and go test assesses? So it examines your functional balance. So this is something that you should examine to know if the patient will be able to work through at home or at office when they are moving from one place to another. So normal adult has less or equal to 10 seconds. Normal geriatric patient should have less or equal to 11 to 20 seconds. And increased fall risk patient, if the tug test comes greater than 20 seconds, then it is an issue with the patient, and you should assess that the patient is at high fall risk. Again, a red flag. And if all the tests or more your quantity of your test has high fall risk patient, then you have to tell the relatives about taking care of the patient or give assistive devices or provide the floor markers, which will help at night or at the things where that they can do it. Gait speed. You are trying, by doing all this tests and giving an assessment, you are trying to avoid the falls, which will increase the probability of the patient not falling or being safe. Gait speed, the other test. So in gait speed, the assessment is mainly about your gait or your walking pattern. So the first part or your left part, if we start up 5 meters, the patient is told to start walking so that they gain the speed. At the start timing is noted when the patient crosses the line, and then 10 meters you have to follow. Finish timing, again you have to stop. There is a stopwatch with you, so you have to stop and let the patient continue it. So that is why patient, you don't feel that there is speeding or slowing, because whenever you start walking, you slowly start it, pick up your speed, and then when the end is coming, again you slow down. So that is why the in-between time is been noted. Gait speed outcome or criteria, how it is assessed. So when gait speed is there, the normal activity is greater than 1 minute per meter per second. So for 10 meters or 10 meters, we can say it is 10 seconds is the normal criteria. So per meter, within a minute, a patient should be able to do the work. Now this criteria or this table informs us that the more faster or more properly, comfortably, if we can do the gait speed, that shows us how we can do our daily chores or functional activities. So greater than 1 meter per second, a patient will be able to do or predictive to do of completing yard work, climb flights of the stairs. If it is less than 1 meter per second, benefits from fall prevention. So greater than 0.67 to complete self-care, and 0.89 meter per second for household activities. So this is very crucial. The second column is very crucial because it helps us to notify how the gait speed can help to know how much patient is able or should be able to perform. Less than 0.60 seconds. So predicts future risk of falls and hospitalization. So in this case, in usually some other countries, in India, we can tell the relatives to take care of the patient. But in other countries, if the paperwork shows that the patient has 0.60 meter per second of the gait speed, then the patient is admitted in the skilled nursing home, where the care has been taken by the nursing staff, and they are allowed to do only the activities that is written in the paperwork. Tend to require assistance with ADL and IADL greater or equal to 0.49 meter per second to cross the street. So when we are moving around, if the patient is unable to cross the street, then a wheelchair or something can be used for the movement of the patient because they are slow. The last thing, 0.40 meter per second, it is longer length of stay in acute care. Again, they'll move from chronic care to acute care. Likely to discharge to skilled nursing, inpatient rehab or nursing home setting, or with home health services. So these are some of the criteria. When your scores go low or you are at high risk of falling, then those geriatric patients are being transferred into a skilled nursing facility. Next come your 6-minute walk test. Now 6-minute walk test, as we all know, we do it for different criteria like cardiopulmonary, musculoskeletal, and even sometimes your vestibular system. So 6-minute walk test also gives you an insight about your balance. So it examines ability to walk at a self-selected speed for a set time interval, that is 6 minutes. Total distance and time has been measured. It has high validity and reliability. It has high validity and reliability to determine patient's exercise tolerance. So depending on the 6-minute walk test, how much the patient is able to do, both your somatosensory point of view, balance point of view, as well as your cardiopulmonary point of view. So that is important. Continuing forward. So that is why I took gait speed, 6-minute walk test and your gait speed together. So both of these combined will give you an assessment about how much the patient is able to walk. At the same time, given the speed of the gait, how much ability functionally the patient is able to do. So these are the two things. Dynamic gait index examines your dynamic gait. It uses 8 items in total. Changes in gait speed, head turns, pivots, obstacles, etc. Normal adult that is 21 plus or minus 3 would have this speed, or the examination can be done in those things. History of fall patient. So 11 plus or minus 4, if you are getting in your dynamic gait index, then the patient might be having history of fall. Sometimes you will get a patient in your clinic saying that, oh yeah, he was just getting off the bed and he fell down, or he was coming out of the bathroom and he fell down. But the most common place where a patient or a geriatric patient falls down is not the bathroom, because they are cautious about the water or the slippery surface, but that is when at night when they want to use washroom, or in the morning when they wake up and they are lethargic and their feet cannot touch the ground, or they have some issue getting the assistive devices. That is the most common time where they have falls. And you should always ask a geriatric patient whether they had falls or they feel like falling when they come out of bed or walk around or come to the clinic or something like that, because we have many assistive people around us in India, and patient might not be able to or mostly not do independent activities, but when they have to, it is difficult for them to avoid the falls, and that is why the assessment scale of balance is very important. Continuing forward, the functional reach test. So as we know, the test describes functional reach test is a person stands in with feet together, a ruler or a wall is been placed with the marker, and the patient is able to reach forward without moving the feet. Your third finger should be assessed as how far the patient is able to move with the hips and not the feet moving. So look at the max distance. Look at the max distance a person can reach forward beyond arm's length while standing. Scoring is above average is 12.2 inches. So inches is already marked on the board, or we already have the ruler that is long enough, and you just have to subtract the places that they have displaced with the hand. So 12.2 inches is the normal. Increased risk of fall is 10 inches, less than 10 inches. So that is high fall risk. And below average is less than 5.6 inches. So I'm sure, I think the wording, since it is light in color, it is unable to see, but it is below average is less than 5.6 inches. So below average, if it is coming, that means in kitchen activities, in some activities, if the job she says to pull over things from the cabinets above or at the same level, in kitchen activities where the female is cooking, then your functional reach test would give you a functional balance score about whether the patient should be allowed to do kitchen activities or not. Because in this case, when the patient is unable to lift up the substance from the cabinet up and put it down or something, he or she is going to have more fall risk because of that activity, because the functional reach test or functional reach is not appropriate. The normal values: 20 to 40-year-old patient or person should have 14.5 to 17 inches. 41 to 69 years of old should have 13.5 to 15 inches. That is a normal reaching capability in forward direction. And 70 to 87-year-old should have 10.5 to 13.5 inches. So these are the normal activities that we can see, or normal criteria that we have to look forward when we are assessing them as high fall risk or normal. These are 2 or 3 of other outcomes that we can use in balance activities, because as we know, other than your vestibular system, even your neurological patient like stroke, ataxia, and some of the other problems will be having balance issues because of loss of mobility, loss of muscle power, and paralysis. So in that case, Fugl-Meyer sensory motor assessment of balance can be used. The performance is a battery of tests which assesses balance specifically for hemiplegics. The maximum score is 14 or is the best score. So Jugel-Meyer, I think many of us have used for the stroke patients or transient ischemic attack patients. The second one is Sprague-Gabriel ataxia best test battery. So any cerebellum ataxia, cerebellar ataxia, all those ataxia and different equilibrium and non-equilibrium tests can be performed. It is suited for the patient with high level of motor skills. 8 test conditions are being performed in this, and patient completes 5 trials of each condition. So in this, each test has to be done 5 times, so you get the best of 5. Take home message or ending up the session, the main important points that we learned for your balance risk or high fall risk outcomes, which is an important thing in our village setting or community that we say. When we talk about our community, there are many geriatric patients that are living and inbound at home because either they are unable to move forward alone independently or they are at risk of fall. So if we assess them whenever they are coming to the clinic for some or the other issue, we should have a way to tell them that they are at high fall risk, or even if they are normal, then we can tell them that given 80 years of age, the patient has good abilities and is not prone to fall. And then the relatives would be confident enough to let the patient go to a temple or do some social activities, which they are not allowing. It depends upon how your patient's family background or relatives are. So sometimes the patient is complaining that he or she is fine, but he is not. While in the other instance, there is that the patient is falling down repeatedly because he or she is adamant about not listening to others. So this is a good, I would say, ideal criteria where we can show what is on the papers, and if the patient is educated enough, it can explain them in detail with the proof. So as we go back forward, so it is the TUG score should be less than 30 seconds. If the high fall risk, the main criteria is TUG score should be greater 30 seconds, greater than functional reach score should be less than 10 inches, Burke throws if less than 45 to 30 to 45 score, coma or tinnitus score should, if less than 19, and dynamic gain index if it is 11 plus or minus 4. These all criteria will give you an insight about whether the patient is at high fall risk and has a red flag about taking an assistive device or taking help or being dependent on certain activities. So you can identify that patient very easily. These are the references that I have used. For vestibular system, there are only 2 books, mainly one book that has been used, Susan Herdman, which is very common and very popularly used. And O'Sullivan also have a vestibular rehabilitation chapter that is given very in detail. So from anatomy physiology, you can learn from that. These are just a normal overview and my information about my email ID and the number. Thank you very much for giving me this ability to showcase about vestibular system and some of the balancing that we can help our community with. Are there any questions that I can answer?
As far, ma'am, I have not received any questions, but yes, I would tell that it was a very informative session we had, that usually we don't understand why we are having some dizziness and what should be done for that. So we don't have any questions right now. I think you have done a great job to explain the things very well. I think we should end the session here, and it was a pleasant evening, pleasant morning with you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Dr. Prachi and the Parole University team for giving me this opportunity to share the information with you. Thank you, everyone.